You are listening to The Real Men Feel Show with your hosts, Andy Grant and Appio Hunter. Real Men Feel encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but you don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel Show is produced live each Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern for your growth and enjoyment. Listen to us on podcast platforms including iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also watch the show on YouTube by visiting realmenfeel.org/YouTube. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at realmenfeelorg and on Facebook, facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Show your support for Real Men Feel by shopping at realmenfeel.org/swag, by visiting digitaltipjar.com/realmenfeel, or even text us a tip. You can show some love for Real Men Feel by texting Real Men Feel, that's all one word, to 504-226-5306. You'll receive a link back to complete your tip and choose the amount. This is a weekly program, and your reviews, comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in our Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's dive into this week's show.
Hello and welcome to Real Men Feel. This is your host, Andy Grant, and I'm very excited that I'm not flying solo for the first time in what seems like a long time. Glad to welcome back Appio Hunter.
Hey, Andy. It is really, really good to be back. I admit that I have really missed just our weekly chats and being here, so it's a good feeling to be back home again.
Cool. And where were you?
I was down in Peru.
Right.
Spent a couple of weeks down there. It was just an amazing experience. Got to do a lot of stuff, crammed a lot of archaeological sites, museums, visits up into the Andes Mountains, spending time with my husband's family, and it was just, wow. I'm ready to go back already, to be honest.
Cool. So your husband is from Peru?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. That's why I was assumed that you had been there before. I knew there's some reason. I'm like, no, Peru.
There's a connection.
Peru, yeah. All right. Now I get it.
Exactly, yeah.
Now I understand my lies while you were gone, telling me, oh, he's been there many times. All right.
In spirit, yes, it's true. I have been there many times in spirit.
Cool. Well, joining us tonight is Mr. Robert Kandell. He is a host of the Tough Love podcast, an accomplished writer, teacher, coach, lecturer. Since 2002, he's been guiding his audience on methods to improve communication, has helped build thousands of successful relationships. So maybe he can improve ours.
Definitely. No question. Guaranteed in the show.
Cool. Awesome. So you've done over 2,000 live events, lectures, podcasts, and workshops since 2002. So I'm glad to add one more to your record, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
So you've worked as a business coach and a life coach?
Yes, currently. Yes.
So you currently do both?
Yes.
Cool. So how different is that, or is it surprisingly not different?
It can be different, but it's often they merge, because I tend to work with entrepreneurs more than anything, or small business owners or small business teams. And what happens is the business life and the personal life are entwined like a DNA strand, and where it's hard to tell where the personal life and the business life. So on the business life, I talk a lot about people's psychology and their self-sabotage and where they're stopping themselves, and also their relationships, because that could block the business. And also in people's personal life, making money and finding their purpose and their success is a big part. So they tend to overlap quite a bit.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I always find. So that's it's funny. It just seems to be kind of what way to call coaching, or the niche seems to ebb and flow with things. But it's helping people clear their crap is kind of what it all comes down to me.
Totally.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah. Now it's interesting because I found the same overlap with in my own my day job. I work with a lot with pros on my site where they are there to pretty much advertise their business, and as I'm showing them how to be successful on the site itself, there's a lot of that conversation about just the whole life, business, and everything else, and the self-sabotaging. So, yep, I see that a lot as well.
Totally.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
And what was your path that kind of got you into coaching? Had you experienced coaching as a client? Have you just always been naturally a helpful person? Did people come and spill their guts to you growing up, or?
Well, my mom was a therapist, and so I grew up the son of a therapist, which means that I was always around people telling my mom stuff. My high school friends tend to talk to my mom sometimes more than me. And I went to college. I actually was the nice guy in the dorm that you could go and chat with, or pretty much he would listen to you. It stopped me from getting some nookie, from dating, because I was the nice guy, the good friend, but I also learned to listen really well. So that was kind of my early stages of coaching back in the day.
Cool. Yeah, I was often called the nice guy and really grew to hate that term as well. So
yeah, it's awful. It's awful. But I learned to be friends with women, which later in life has been a very powerful thing. But at the time, I was just like, I want women, I want experience, and they're like, well, I want to tell you about this boy problem. I'm like, all right, and treat me like crap. And I'm like, I could treat you well, but I couldn't say that because I was the nice guy. And
yes,
memories.
Indeed.
No, it could be it could be a nice guy support group call with some week in the future, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. But definitely at least 2 or 3 episodes of this show.
So the part of that always drove me nuts was nice guys finish last, would just like pound it in. I don't even know where that originally came from, that cliche, that saying, but I am much like what you're saying is, as I grew older, it's kind of the tortoise and the hare. The nice guy kind of wins in the end, though. Right?
It's true. It's true. I mean, I have the most amazing relationship with the most amazing woman, and so I'm grateful. So even at the time when I was younger, I felt like I was losing. By far, I feel like I've won the race.
Cool.
I won it. I'm winning.
Yeah, it's not over yet. You still got a ways to go.
Yeah, I got a long way to go.
Cool. There was one phrase I saw on your website earlier this week, and I'd never heard this before, and I just really liked it and want to ask you kind of what it means. But that you said you were once a man who was numb and dumb.
Okay.
And what time frame? What was that referring to?
I was pretty much numb and dumb the first 28 years of my life. When it comes down to it, I was a nice guy, but I also put my attention on other people and refused to feel the extent of my own emotions. There's a great book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover, an epic, horrible book for men, because you read it and you're like, oh, that's me. Oh, no, that's me. So I was 28 years old, and I was actually married to a woman I didn't quite know and couldn't feel. I was very successful. I was 20 years old, working downtown San Francisco, 6-figure income, the whole American dream. But we weren't really relating. My emotions were not felt, and we were kind of passing each other in the night. And then my whole life really changed around my 29th birthday when I took a first class. I actually took a class on sex with my wife. And when you're not having a lot of sex with your wife and she says, you want to take a class on sex? You answer, yes, I'll take a class on sex. Yeah, it actually came out, yes, I'll take a class on sex. And so I was sitting in this room, in this circle, my first class on personal development class on sexuality. And the teacher asked me to introduce myself. So I'm like, hi, Robert. And then I start to talk and I talk. And I finished, and I think it's pretty epic, and I was really smart, and I thought the teacher would clap and invite me up to teach with him. And instead he said, hey, do you know your wife's crying? And she was sitting right next to me, and I was so numb to feeling her and noticing her that in my introduction I had been so chauvinistic and rude that she started to cry. And it was in that moment where I flashed of like, wow, I am pretty numb, and that was a pretty dumb thing to do. And so that was the start of my journey, because I said, I want to understand this part of me. I want to understand her, and the whole world etch-a-sketched after that.
So if you were numb and dumb, how would you describe yourself now?
Right now, I am a pretty amazing person when it comes down to it. And I say this, it's very hard to toot your own horn in the world, but I've done some significant work in the 20 years. I just had my 48th birthday. So it's really been 20 years since that moment. And I can feel, I can sense, I know when my clients are, something's wrong with my clients, I'll send them a text, hey, how's it going? They're like, how'd you know I was having a rough day? Or, my wife comes in with something on her face, like a flat face. And I'm like, hey, honey, what's up? She's like, nothing. And I'm like, are you sure? It's like, no, everything is fine, And I was like, are you sure? And then finally I was like, all right, I'm having this thing with my mom. And then all of a sudden we start talking. And so where I was numb and dumb before, through deliberate work for 20 years, I really do have a pretty incredible spidey sense that something is amiss. And then I use my curiosity to find out, to love the people I'm intimate with better.
Was the spidey sense always there, you just weren't using it? Or is it truly something that you think was foreign and you developed it?
My viewpoint on this is I think we all have a really strong spidey sense. I think we can read minds. There's stories of tribes in Africa where they don't have to talk. They actually have telepathy. They can sense each other from miles away because they don't have technology, because they haven't lost the sense. They still have the sense. I don't know if that's true, but it's a damn good story that I really believe. But I've really shown myself that where I didn't have this sense before, I was very smart. I was very good at linear and strategy. Now I can really sense things I have no way to know. And when I teach, sometimes these things that come into my mind, I'm like, that wasn't me. That was really smart. That was not me. Has really been advantageous. So I do think it's something I rediscovered.
Cool. So go on, Apio.
Oh, no, that's fine. You ask your question, and then I'll ask mine.
All right, I think we're kind of on the same lane because, we are both rather intuitive, spiritual people. We do a lot of, we both kind of work in the Akashic Records. Apio does some channeling. We're kind of all over there. So do you kind of recognize that? Would you call that intuition on yourself? Would you call that a connection to something bigger? How do you reference that spidey sense in a comic book way?
Yeah. So Akashic Records, I have a client, Andrew Bardis. I don't know if you know him. Truly amazing. He's the galactic historian. You guys would dig him a lot. He's a pretty awesome guy. He is ridiculous at knowing everything. But it's a different level where he can read into those systems. And I'm more on a pragmatic, really good poker player sense. I'm really at that more baseline abstraction, one-to-one relating. So it's a different kind of intuitive. And I love all forms of intuition. I think it's all powerful. But the one I've really worked is reading people, understanding people, feeling people, putting together the facts with the intuition to say really smart, hopefully helpful things to the people I love and my clients.
When as you were talking, I was reminded of a guest that we've had on the show before, Diane Collins, who wrote the book "Do You Quantum Think?" And you reminded me of a conversation that we were having with her about us living in a system and living in a holistic, complete, interconnected system where that spidey sense, if you will, oftentimes is derived from that quantum connectedness, the idea that the butterfly effect that you've probably heard of. Butterfly flaps its wings, and there's a hurricane somewhere else because it's all interconnected. So it's very interesting. You should bring it up that way, but talk about it from a base level. And I like to think of it as it's just that interconnectedness, that quantum field, if you will, of that interconnectedness.
Absolutely. I mean, do you know about the limbic system in the brain and the effect it has? There's 3 parts to the brain. There's the autonomic system, which is your fight or flight and runs your, the bodily functions. There's the cortex, which is a thinking part. And the least understood is the limbic system, which is your feeling part. And so your ability to feel is actually part of your biology. And when a mother picks up a baby and puts it on her chest, it's actually their limbic systems interacting that calms the baby, because the mother has the stronger limbic system. She can actually calm the baby just with her mind. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So it goes down to her personal energy and what she's radiating, and so that's what all the things that some people think are woo woo were out there, and scientists finding nope, that's actually a part of us.
Totally.
Love it.
Again, it's there's nothing that's separate. Everything is interconnected in some way or another, whether it's energetic or physical or biological. Yep, makes sense to me.
Yep. There's a book called General Theory of Love, which is the best book ever for explaining how the brain works. I read it on the New York City subways, short little stories. So General Theory of Love.
General Theory of Love.
Best book on that ever about the limbic system.
Cool. Yeah, I've always had fun, listening to and reading about the brain and how it works and how it can sometimes trick us, and how just the whole thing about how we as human beings, how we have this thing in our head that both keeps us alive and screws us up big time.
Completely and utterly.
Yeah, one of my favorite books, so I have a history of depression and suicide attempts, and one of my favorite books full of just practical tips is, how to stay alive when your brain's trying to kill you. and just the notion of just because you're thinking it doesn't mean it's true, and because you're thinking it doesn't mean it's helping you either. Right. So that book sounds interesting. I got to find that one. It's good. So another thing I noticed on your website was in your video, you talk about that it's a tough time to be a man. Yes. And so could you expand on that about what right now is making this a tough time to be a man? So the first thing I want to say is, just because I say it's a tough time to be a man doesn't minimize or eliminate it's a tough time to be a woman. It's always been a tough time to be a woman. And so sometimes when people hear that dichotomy, they hear, because I'm saying this, it means that it's not. And I get into a lot of arguments with women who are saying, but it's really been hard to be a woman. I'm like, I agree. And that's not what I'm saying, but it's hard, so I just want to make sure that's understood before I start my little dialogue around it. I've noticed that there's been a lot of changes in the world in the last 30 years that have been make a lot of changes. Women have actually risen up in their power. They've risen up in their status. Things like, if you look at the percentages of genders going to college, in the 1970s, it was about 65% men and 35% women, and now it's reversed. Women are getting higher degrees, they're more at college, they're successful. The pay grade that was 64 cents in 1980 between women and men, now for millennial women entering the workforce, it's 93 cents. And so all these things are changing. There's been a lot of women programs to allow women to expand and grow, and there hasn't been the same advantages for men and boys specifically. There's some really great books out there. Man Interrupted by the guy who did the Stanford prison is really incredible book. And there's a book called The War Against Boys, which is also another great book that I've been reading in preparation for my book. But you just see statistical analysis after statistical analysis where the world is really opening up for women, which is wonderful, but it's really shrinking for men, which is not great because the dichotomy is happening. And so what's happening is women are becoming more empowered. Men who are used to being the dominant are not knowing who to be. And instead of stepping up and saying, okay, I've got to increase my game, they're actually giving up. And there's a higher percentage of obesity. There's a higher percentage of gaming, boys, moving to gaming rather than interacting with people. Pornography is off the charts and ridiculous, especially with the advent of free porn. Back in 2008, the Butterfly Effect. There's actually this great, awful podcast or book called The Butterfly Effect about the event of free porn and the massive impact it's had. So men don't know who to be. And from that, there's been a lot of dissatisfaction. So it's a tough time to be a man because we don't know who to be in the world, and women are noticing. A lot of women are saying, men are acting more like boys than men. And a lot of men are saying women are acting more like men than women. And so there's a lot of missing each other in this generation. And so this is different than the notion of guys being the nice guy. This is truly guys not knowing what to do at all. So then they're not even being nice?
Well, the nice guy response, let's call it that. Again, go back to No More Mr. Nice Guy to get the evidence. What he says, basically, Dr. Robert Glover says, is that guys are being nice to get the approval of women. In doing so, they push down all their emotions and all their angst. And so underneath this facade of, I am a nice guy, is seething anger and resentment, which women can feel. The men don't feel permission to express, and therefore there's a lot of disconnection. There's another documentary called The Mask We Live In, which is about boys, man up, don't be a pussy, don't cry, all these emotions that are denied. And men are suffering because we, society, have created a prison where they can't authentically ask for help and be themselves.
So you mentioned that the world opening up and women rising up to more opportunities and it shrinking for men. Can it open up and grow for both, or will it always be one or the other rising and falling?
Well, the good news is we have the millennials. And the bad news is we have the millennials. God bless them. But the millennials are going to change, in my opinion, are going to change the whole dynamic of gender. And it's going to take a generation. So I think we have another 15, 20 years of mayhem in terms of gender dynamics not working. I think after that point, after a lot of resetting, I think things will change. I mean, look at the Me Too and the Weinstein effect, which is epically important in my point of view. But, some men say, I've never been scared to be a man before because I'm afraid of my actions coming back at me and causing me harm. Do I hold a door open for a woman? Can I make a pass at a woman? Can I tell a woman she's pretty? I don't know. I might get trouble. I might end up in the news later. And so there's extensive amount of fear. So to answer your question, I do think there's hope. I do think that we'll find some balance. I just think it's going to take a good 10 or 15 years to find it.
And do you have a sense of what does that balance look or feel like to you?
I see more equality coming up. I see the thing about the millennials that are different from other generations I've seen, and even the newer generation, the whole Parkland students rising is so inspiring to me because you can see that the advocates for it are women or boys and girls, to be specific, and they're both respected and empowered. They're working together. That kind of collaboration is the thing that I think is going to rise. I see we're going to see less gender differences in the future, which will lead to more equality. It might lead to a decrease in what's called polarity. This is a David Data difference between the polarity creates the sexual charge between men and women. So I think there might be a change in the way we view sexuality. But I do see more both equality and collaboration coming in these future generations.
Cool. So the simplest way is just we'll be people.
We'll be people.
Less men and women, more people.
Right. I mean, just look at let's go back the last 70 years. Let's go to like the 50s or maybe even like the Mad Men time. I guess that was in the 40s. What a serious difference in terms of what's allowable and what's not. I mean, you watch Mad Men and you cringe at the way men looked and treated women. And, to be honest, the way women co-created that situation of playing small. And, now here we are and then, turning into 2020. And things are significantly changing. So it's exciting, and it's going to take some time to keep finding equilibrium.
Right. Cool. Because lately we've done a lot of shows about Me Too and harassment and men being afraid to be men. And I ask a lot of people, what does the future look like to you? And you've kind of had the clearest way to sum it up and share that. So I appreciate your foresight and yeah, actually, a generation, that's not too long. That's not too bad. That's doable.
Well, it's a long time for the women now looking for a good man. And it's a long time for the guys now who don't know who to be and are slipping in, I've been reading a lot about isolation, and the greatest fear of middle-aged men, which are mostly alone. There's more single adult Americans now for the first time in history. 50.2% of adults are now single for the first time in recorded history. So people are getting married later, 28 for men, 26 for women, compared to 20 to 22 about 20 years ago. And kids are having kids less and later. There's all these things that are changing that are significantly impact the current state of romance. So, It'll be messy for a while, but I do have faith that it'll find its way.
So I'm kind of curious, your thoughts about, the message that we've been hearing for so long, for so many decades, is that men are responsible for all the ills of society. Just that drumbeat of beating up on men for all the bad things that have happened, wars and the production of Donald Trump and everything else. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and how whether or not the millennials have accepted it, processed it, rejected it. Just kind of get your thoughts a little bit about that whole drumbeat of that message.
Well, my unpopular opinion is that all genders co-created the current situation. Women are as much responsible for the patriarchy as men. Patriarchy was a great concept gone awry. Chivalry started for a reason, to respect women so they could procreate and have space to have children. And it's just gone skewy. The Industrial Revolution really skewed a lot of things. Monogamy, is a relatively new term. Marriage is not what people expect. If you go back and look at there's some great books out there. The Way We Never Were is a book around marriage. There's really interesting things that we don't think, and we think it's always been like this. It hasn't. So it's hard to say, because women weren't disempowered, and I don't want to minimize that. But there's always been a subtle co-creation where all genders, really, there's not two genders, there's many genders. All genders have really played into the creation. And what I'm seeing in the last 40 years, really, with the Equal Rights Amendment and things that happened in the 70s, women are like, okay, this doesn't work for us anymore. And you'll just notice the world is changing really because of women. Women are stepping up and saying no, and women have the trump card. They create the children. And so there's been this shift where women are finally like saying no mas, and they've led the tide for the change of the last 40 years.
Yeah, I'm actually inclined to agree with your point of view, because I've kind of shared the same thing, just haven't often given it voice. So it may be unpopular, but I personally tend to feel that it is a lot more accurate than a lot of people are willing to admit.
I'm a big fan of giving women the power they're due. And women will argue with me saying this is all men's fault. I'm like, why are you disempowering the power of your gender?
Yeah,
you are party to this. You are creating this, and thank you so much for your gender for changing it, because I think this is a much better world for me to live in, and a much better world for my daughters to live in. So I'm really excited to see where things go.
Indeed. It's the same way.
Yeah.
So, Robert, do you think in this current state of men being confused, men being isolated, men not knowing what being a man means, are there any good role models of a man alive here and now that's a good, that's what being a man today looks like?
That's so funny. I one of my viewpoints in the book was looking for men out there who you can respect. And there's actually a lot less role models now than they were. So then I did some more research on it. And then I was like, the role models we actually had weren't the best in the past. Like John Wayne is one of those epic role models, but I don't know if we want to follow the John Wayne, ethos anymore. I don't think that's quite the smartest thing ever. I think it's not so much male role models you want to find. It's more internal. And you want to start to look at your bad behaviors, your poor habits that you want to improve on, to find it. And I think men really need other men. I think this is a big piece. I know one of my major issues in my life at 48, and I live in the Valley in a gated community with my beautiful wife and my 2 stepkids, is I don't have a lot of in-person male friends. There's a lot more isolation that's going on now, because men do need other men for reflection and to share emotions and to get approval and attention from. So back to your question, is I don't really have strong men. I've had great teachers who are men, and they've been as flawed as everyone else. So looking for the best from each person and finding out what works for me is the best advice I can give.
Cool. And it's funny they mentioned John Wayne, but before we started the show, we talked about how kind of Real Men Feel began when I did a workshop that I called To Be a Man. And I would put up a picture of John Wayne.
Yeah.
And millennials today Don't know who that is.
Don't even know this. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally don't know who that is.
But so then I throw up a picture of Justin Bieber. Say, is this the Motor Man? Like, oh, that no one would know who John Wayne was, and Justin Bieber always got a reaction of, "No, that's not a man." And nope.
Yeah, my
I've
stepkids
not
don't know.
spoken to a pro Bieber crowd yet, so
My stepkids don't know who the Beatles are, so it's
Yeah.
sad. It's sad. Sad.
I guess we have to teach them.
Yeah, indeed.
I mean, and before the show we all mentioned kind of Wayne Dyer a little bit, and that was always once I began to, realize being a nice guy was probably denying a lot of emotions and allow all of my emotions, and realize that I wasn't just this meat suit waiting to die. That Dyer was really a role model for how I wanted to live and to be and interact with the world and create things, and. Yeah, I haven't found the next generation of it, or maybe it's you, Robert. But that's kind of I feel like my own whole of what to look forward to, what to look to as a living man who's walking the talk. That's
I've done a lot of research into men's books because I'm writing a book for men. It's called UnHidden, a book for men and those confused by them. And so in research, I've done a lot of looking for great books out there, and there's really not a great books for men. And so then I found out why, because 80% of books are bought and read by women.
Yeah.
So publishers are less interested in making books for men. I actually went to Hay House and I proposed it, and they really liked my performance. They liked my platform. I had but they're like, we're 100% women or 98% women to read our stuff, so we can't do a book for men. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And you go into Amazon and look for men's books, and most of them are 20 to 30 years old. Iron John by Robert Bly, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, Dr. John Gray. There are books out there. Neil Strauss, The Game. God knows why that's a book for men. The Truth by Neil Strauss. That's an amazing book. So it really is. We're missing books, and we're missing the conversation, the opportunity. I did some research into something that's called the MRA, which is the Men Rights Activism. And there was a time, it was about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there's a big uproar about them. And I was like, this is dumb. The MRA, why do we need, men don't need men rights activism. And I was like, this is stupid. And then the more research I did, I was like, oh, the greatest thing that men are denied is the opportunity for them to feel their emotions, a place. And they are suffering under the weight of the prison that's co-created by society. And so a lot of men are isolated, a lot of men are suicidal, a lot of men are self-inflicting of wounds and self-sabotaging just because they don't have the freedom to be all of them. And so my book and my work is really dedicated to create a space, a conversation for both men and women to fully have their full emotions.
So I love that you mentioned MRA, because in our last show, we talked about MGTOW, the men going their own way movement, which members have described to me as a philosophy, and it's more extreme than MRA. But yeah, our last show, we got more negative comments and attacked and called names than anything in our
Congratulations.
history.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
I know. I did love it because I'm afraid of hitting a nerve. And I've actually got a couple guys that dropped the anonymity and hiding and are going to be on a show next month.
Wonderful.
So I'm looking forward to having them tell me what they're about instead of people calling them and labeling them from outside. But they seem to be taking the notion of, yep, I'm not having kids. Yep, I'm staying single, and I've never been happier. But saying it almost like an angry, lying to themselves sort of way. It feels like to me. But did you research? Did you get into that philosophy at all? The people that yeah.
I mean, it's not just the MRA. There's actually a subset in Japan. Japan's really interesting around this. So there's a subset of Japanese men, and the percentage of men in their 30s, I'm going to have to get the statistic right. Actually, if I do this wrong, please forgive me. It's a while since I saw this. But there's something like 28% of Japanese men under 30 are still virgins and have no desire to actually interact with a woman. They're actually more stated towards sex dolls, video games, and pornography, and which is significantly impacting the whole Japanese culture, because of course, people are living longer, and without the younger generation, it upsets the whole ecosystem. And Japan, of course, is a huge country. And so there's this culture of just men giving up. I think I mentioned this, in the beginning. It's not just men who are angry. It's a culture of men. This is too hard. I don't understand it. Women are disapproving. Women are angry. And why should I bother? I can go to a porn site, any free porn site, find any kind of porn I want, 10,000 videos on any simple subtopic. I can pick my subcategory, masturbate, get gratified, go to bed, drink a beer. And it's an epidemic of people not, welcoming. So there, I say a lot that, men are dumb and women are angry. And really what's happening is that men are not feeling approved of. They don't have the ability to approve of themselves. And so what they're doing is they're disconnecting, they're detaching. And because of that, women are just like, hey, where are the men? We're getting angrier. And we have this cycle of increasing chasm between the genders.
Christian, I'm on porn. CNN actually has a series, and I saw the first episode last week, and it was in Japan. And your stat, you are remembering correctly, because I recall it from the show. So
yeah, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, and I remember being just shocked. But yeah, it's too hard. It's the kind of the old bad sex caper comedy of kids and going all out, and I got to get laid, and people are like, oh, nope, give up. I'll just rent a video and get drunk and.
I'm good. Yeah.
Exactly.
God.
I don't mean to be depressing. I mean, I will say it again. I do think there's hope, and I think it's going to be a mess for a generation. That's my viewpoint.
So you really think like the current if it's the millennials are going to save it, then it's our generation that's given up, and the people that have given up, they're kind of beyond salvation?
I don't think it's just one generation. I think it's across the board. I think there is a lot of isolation and loneliness going on out there. The Boston Globe did an article a couple of years ago about men fear isolation more than cancer or emphysema. They're afraid of dying alone. It's a scary time out there, and so I don't think it's just one age group. Yeah. And millennials, or just hopefully it goes away. I think it is where millennials be like, I'm not following the way you did it. I mean, the whole dating structure has changed. I'm sure you've heard this once or twice before. And I'm 48. And so when I was romancing and dating and courting, it was pretty straightforward. There's a girl you liked, you flirted, someone you met at work, you asked them out for a dinner, you asked them out to the movies. It was a one-on-one experience. And then really with the generation after me, the Y generation, what happened was they tend to go out in groups. Like my nephew is 22, 23 now, and he would talk about how they would just go out with groups and then they would hook up, from the group, but there was group dating. And now with millennials, it's even going. The current state of romance has really shifted. The advent of the cell phone, the advent of electronic communication has significantly altered the way people communicate and relate. The Tinder revolution, several billion downloads of Tinder, and people constantly using that to have higher quantity of interactions, but lower quality.
Quality, right.
And so what's happening is people are going on a coffee date. It doesn't work out. They leave. They pick up their phone. They go to Tinder. The night's still young. Maybe I can find someone else to hook up with. There's none of this refractory period between rejection. There's less time to feel the feelings. We're moving really quickly in the fact. And also, if you're in a relationship and you hit a bump, in the past, you'd worked really hard to get those dates. You stay in the fire, you stay in the connection. And now they're like, well, I hit a bump. That was fun. I'm going to ghost you. Ghosting meaning just exit without communication and go to Tinder and find someone else, because Tinder actually enlightens or shows a man's gaming, hunting aspect. And it's a very different experience for a man than it is for a woman. Or the masculine versus the feminine is probably a better way of saying that.
During this conversation, I'm sitting here in the back of my mind thinking it's probably a good thing that we don't have the holodecks from Star Trek Next Generation. Mm-hmm. Imagine where that would go, and the whole level of ghosting and not interacting at all if those existed.
Oh, well, it's soon. Virtual reality is a breath away.
Yeah.
And it's right? Here. Holodecks are coming, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, oof, boy. You know, speaking to the whole dynamic of, you know, the millennials, perhaps even the Generation Z, which comes after the millennials, maybe you could speak to the dynamics of communication a little bit more about, you know, how those two generations tend to communicate with each other, particularly different genders.
Communication is my love. I love communication, mostly because people are really trained to be mediocre communicators. It's not people's fault. We're taught to withhold. We're taught to hide. We're taught to wear masks. You don't really reveal yourself to your intimate partner until several months in, and there's a lot of betrayal in that. People are constantly having emotional affairs, if not physical affairs, and so there's really a tendency to lack of honesty, white lies running the show, rather than fully being who you are. So I advocate 100% honesty with your partners, and I advocate creating the space and rewarding your partner for them to be honest with you, which is something that isn't talked about. Most people don't make it safe for their partners to tell the truth and then get mad when they are emotionally cheating or physically cheating. In terms of differences between genders, you know, I tend to talk about masculine versus feminine communication, and the basic feeling behind this is that the masculine communication is to produce and create, to move objects, to create actions. Feminine tends to communicate to create connection, to enforce intimacy. And so a big difference between men and women, if a man's a masculine communicator and a woman's a feminine communicator, a woman will say something or create a problem as a way to connect to the man, to reveal different parts, to create intimacy. And a man will hear that as, oh, I must fix it now. And so there's a difference in goals of the communication. I was having this relationship, and I've been doing this for a long year, and I still falter. But about 3 or 4 months ago, I was sitting with my wife, and she was telling me about the kids, and you know, blah blah blah. And I was just like, okay, this is what we do. And then her face got skewed up, and I was like, what's up? She's like, I just wanted you to validate my feelings. And I was like, oh, oops, sorry, slipped into the masculine there. She's like, yeah, you did. I'm like, I went into the masculine, and so I apologize. And now I actually take that extra step every time to say, okay, you know, I want to hear your feelings first, and then let's move into the action together, rather than me being the guy just trying to fix everything.
So does making it safe for 100% honesty, that doesn't mean like, I promise not to be upset. It means allowing for upset to come from honesty and full reactions, or what? What does it mean?
It means that you both allow each other to be human. And even if you get upset with something, your first response is, thank you for being honest with me, or I appreciate you revealing this part of me, a part of you, excuse me. And this is my response to it. And then, so partner A says, you know, something chargy or something challenging. Partner B will be like, thank you for your honesty. I appreciate you telling me that. You first say, I'm just glad that you told me. Okay, my response to it, the impact that has on me is A, B, and C. And the partner A will listen and say, well, thank you for telling me your reaction, telling me your impact. And then the response, my impact or your impact is blah, blah, blah. And you get into a collaboration over the issue. You work into the motivation of why partner A did that in the first place. Partner B can say like, wow, you know, like I was just coaching 2 people this week on one partner cheating. And I said the chargiest thing to the person who was cheated on. I said, you know, have you seen your co-creation of him cheating? And she was like, what? He's the asshole. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that, but he's the jerk. He's the one who did it. I'm like, yeah, but do you see how he was telegraphing he was going to do this? His needs weren't being met. You're obsessed with work. You're gaining weight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then in that, she started to see how she co-created the infidelity. And so if they had more open communication, I think he would have said, you know, I'm having these feelings, I'm having these thoughts about cheating with my ex-girlfriend. And she's like, but at least I'm glad you told me before you did it. Here's the most interesting one I've ever run across. I was coaching a high-end New York escort, beautiful, young thing. $800 to $1,200 per hour escort in New York City. And, I coached her for 10 months and amazing, brilliant human being. Anyway, she said to me about 6 months in, she said, the funny part is that my clients would rather be doing the things with me, with their wives, than me. But because the wife is so closed to this part of me, I have to hire you, cheat, to have my needs met. And it changed my whole perspective on something, the whole perspective on it, because I saw where one partner won't even listen, people are going to do what they're going to do to get gratified. So both people are responsible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always been a firm believer in the whole co-creation. Well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Within the past 4 years, I have been a very passionate believer in that whole co-creating thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are talking to your clients and you're coaching them, do you have them look at themselves first, or do you have them look at the whole co-creation aspect of it? I mean, how do you typically approach that with them?
It really depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
There's not one shoe that fits all, obviously. Sometimes the partner, let's just use the example of cheating. Sometimes the partner who is cheated on just needs to rant about the other person for a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a month, and they've got to run those feelings, because if I start to go with their own responsibility before they've emptied out their charge, it's a fool's errand, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I use my intuition to figure out what's the point where it's positive or impactful for them to communicate, and to the point where it drifts into a toxic, ranting about their partner. When I feel the toxic coming, I'll be like, okay, great, we're done. Okay, now let's start to look at your responsibility of how you co-created, because it actually gives them the power back. We're totally disempowered when it's always his fault or her fault. When you actually say, wow, I co-created this, it's actually empowering. It actually feels good once people get there. Sometimes I'll start right off, depending on the person and their own connection to themselves, to be like, okay, do you see how you did that? And like, yeah, so I did that. And we can talk about that. So it's very specific.
Right.
So if you're arguing with your partner, I don't recommend you do this yourself. Yeah, I cheated, but look how you co-created it. No, not a good technique. It's let that person really run their feelings and their charge. Don't defend yourself. Answer your questions. Let them run the charge, and then you can say, "Well, I want to tell you the motivation I had for this. You've been distant, and I try to talk to you about these feelings time and time again. Here's a specific example where I was speaking about how lonely I am, and it felt like you heard me, but then you went right back to work. Cheating on you was a really bad mistake, and I apologize for that, but here's the reason. And then if the relationship is strong enough, you'll start to see. So it's a tender, vulnerable, can be really slow process, but to have the intimacy you want, it's mandatory.
For sure.
So correct me if I'm wrong. This all feels like it is the kind of the definition, all these examples of living unhidden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's 100% honesty. Is that the key, or
Yep.
there? Yeah. All right.
Yep.
What are secondary elements of living unhidden?
Responsibility, personal responsibility, I think is really important. I think it really starts with that. Actually starts with self-love. I think self-love is the most important piece to any positive, optimal relationship, where you really sit with finding approval from yourself. We are trained, especially men, to look externally for validation. If I have a hot wife, I'm doing well. If I have a shiny sports car, I'm doing well. If I have a powerful job, I'm doing well. If I have this bank or this trinket, I'm doing well. And to me, that is the worst habit men have, because then they're depending for the elements of external validation for them to feel good. And so what I teach men to self-validate. And that's why I'm able to say I'm awesome, because I spent 20 years learning to self-validate.
Right.
then I don't depend on my wife or my students or my money or my success rate to feel good. I already feel good by myself. Then the positive validation that comes from other people is the gravy. I still accept it. It feels great.
Right.
And I'm not dependent on it.
Right.
When you build this self-empowerment, then you're a whole person, not looking to be filled up by another person. And from that, when your partner gets mad at you and says you're a jerk, you could be like, you're so good with yourself. And I was like, yeah, I kind of was a jerk. You're right. That was a bad communication. Or, I didn't communicate that well. Like, it's not like my whole identity is being shaken by the anger of my partner. I'm actually seeing it. And so it creates so much flow. So self-validation, which leads to more responsibility. In the responsibility, it actually feels good to tell the truth because that increases the intimacy between you and the partner. It's not easy. It just feels good. Because I know every time I lie to a partner and they buy the lie, I know they're relating to the lie, and I can't trust them because I know they don't really see me. So every time I lie, it's like shooting myself in the foot.
There's a question that just popped up in the chat about chronic cheaters, kind of going back to the whole, the excuses and the chronic cheaters and so forth. Could you kind of talk to that a little bit about the dynamic of that and how it fits into the conversation?
Sure. Chronic cheating, to me, is another form of addiction. Addiction has a very negative connotation in the world. I think addiction is part of the human condition. P. Mellibodi's Codependence No More, first paragraph, first chapter, basically says that 99% of the world, of the Western world, I think, she said, is codependent. And I was like, oh man, but because we're raised in a codependent society. And so I think chronic cheaters are people who have an addiction to the thrill, the danger, the self-sabotage of getting caught. Because you don't know what a chronic cheater is, and because they've gotten cheated time and time again. So if you have a chronic cheater, there's a thrill, just like gambling, just like alcohol, just like shopping, just like food addiction, cocaine. There's different receptors in the brain that release dopamine to actually feel good. It actually is a habit on some level. That's on one side of the coin. And then the other side of the coin, a person who remains with a chronic cheater, to me, there's evidence of low self-esteem that they keep themselves in a situation with a chronic cheater. So you can blame the chronic cheater if you want, but I look at both people co-creating the system where the person can get off cheating and then he or she actually enjoys the thrill of the victim, getting mad, and the victim actually gets off or gets some kind of energy for being in this situation time and time again.
Yeah, it's chronic co-creating.
It's chronic co-creating.
Right. If it's co-creation for once, it's got to over and over too.
Right. I mean, just think about it. And I hate that I'm blowing some people's viewpoints about this, and I love that I'm blowing people's viewpoints on this, but you get a lot of cred for pain in this world. You get a lot of credibility for pain, for bad things happening to you. I mean, think about it on the bus. You sit on the bus and you're sitting next to these people, and the one person's talking about the pain, their backache, their boss, their mother-in-law, all the things that are wrong with them, and you just sit with it, it's nothing new. Now imagine the same experience, and the person talking about the great sex they had, the mind-blowing orgasm, the epic love they're happening, and then you'd get up and move away from them because what is wrong with that person? They're so happy about the last great orgasm they had. That is improper to speak of nice things on the bus. And that's our society. You get a lot of cred for getting cheated on and a lot of attention. So it's complex.
Yeah. Being full of self-love, you're kind of looked at as
what's wrong with you?
Egocentric. Yeah. But I really, when I was depressed, I really thought happy people were insane. They were in denial of the realities of how shitty everything really is.
Yeah. Because that's what we swim in. We're fish swimming in a society of disapproval. We're fish swimming in this pain-based reality. And so, the work I've done is to rise up from this scarcity-based mentality that we live in to a place of abundance, where I see everything as abundant. And that's changed my whole viewpoint on life better relationships, more clients, more money, more time for myself, more self-love, more space for me to make miscues or mistakes. Oh, well, I had one epic success in my life of business. I built a business to an international 8-figure firm. I was the co-creator of that. And I also had one epic failure where I built a business in Los Angeles that totally, utterly failed miserably. And so both are, I call, successes because I learned from the successful business and learned from the failing business. And that's because I have a lot of space for self-love.
Yeah. When anyone doesn't love themselves, and to put the pressure on someone else, like no other human being can love you enough to fill your self-hatred or your lack of ability to really hold on to your self-validation.
Right. The Buddhists call it a hungry ghost.
Oh, like that.
Yeah. The hungry ghost is depicted as a being with a really long, thin neck, a bloated stomach, and they can't eat enough ever. And so hungry ghosts are looking in present time to fix the pain of the past. And hungry ghost is a very, another big epidemic in our society.
Yeah, I see that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So are these also the topics you cover on the Tough Love podcast?
Yes, this is what I do every week on some level. Yeah.
Well, it sounds very uplifting.
I think so. I do a 20-minute rant on a topic, and I wax the poetic about what I believe in and how I've moved through a lot of these things. A lot of my podcasts are in real time, things that are happening for me. And then I tend to do coaching sessions, live coaching sessions. I'm always looking for people to come on the show and be coached for free. So please, it's the hardest part of the job is getting people to come on the show. And I love it. It can be totally anonymous. You don't have to say your name or anything. But that's my thrill, is helping people on the show.
All right. Well, how can people find out about that? How can they volunteer? How can they connect with the show?
Come to my website, my new website. It's called robertkandell.com, KANDELL.com. On there, you'll find information about the new book. My podcasts are listed on there, how to volunteer, how to get on my mailing list. I'll be putting up some free products. There'll be some products, and eventually I'm doing a membership site. So there's a whole plan for the next year. But just go to robertkandell.com. Everything is housed there. Great.
So is kind of the coming year, everything coming together under this the notion of living unhidden?
That's the idea. I mean, I didn't really want to write a book. I don't want to write a book. And then Morgan, my muse, you should write a book. I'm like, I don't want to write a book. And then I just had the flash, like, oh, I have to put all these ideas in one book. And so it's really been a thrill and a pleasure to write this book. And I'm planning to release it November 4th, 2018. If all things go well, please don't hold me to that. That's the plan. But it's been a really exciting process to get all these stories and ideas into one book. And so far, it's been pretty well received. So again, robertkandell.com to find out the book.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And how long have you been doing the Tough Love podcast?
I started in October 2015. I started really because I was so tired of running workshops. I'd done 10 years of workshops, and I was sick and tired of the enrollment. I was like, I never want to do this again. But I still had things to say, and I was like, oh, I'll do a podcast, not knowing any idea how to do a podcast. So it was my house in Venice Beach without a microphone, without a headset, Finnegan the dog in the background. The Venice fire department was 3 blocks away, and the sound quality is awful. So I just said, I'll try it. And I just haven't stopped since then. So I think I just published show 124. Nice. It's now twice a week. Shows come up, and it's on iTunes and Stitcher, your favorite podcast app. And it's really my pleasure. It's thrilling to do it. And I've gotten good feedback. And yeah, I'm really proud of the output of it.
Cool. So it sounds like that. And well, the book release is really kind of reshaping your business world, at least it seems.
My truest desire is to get in front of people in live speaking. I don't know if you know who Henry Rollins is. He's an epic spoken word artist, been doing it for, 20, 25 years. And he was my hero. Talk about role model. He was my hero when I was growing up. And so my desire is really to get in front of audiences and speak and turn people on. Kyle Kreese is another guy that's doing it really well these days. Really impressed by him. And so I thought I could just start a speaking career, but it'd be better to have the book. So it's been a 2-year investment to enhance my speaking career to get there. Now, if you're listening and you want a speaker, I will go anywhere and speak anywhere if the time and energy exchange is right. So I love speaking in front of people. It's a skill of mine, but really it's about getting in front of people. And I have one gig that's possible teaching 13 and 14-year-olds in Austin, an Austin school. That's forming. I don't know if I'm going to get it, but I'm really excited about the notion to get in there young.
Yeah.
And again, I'll speak much more politely than I probably did on this podcast and speak to our listening. But those kids are smart and they know a lot more than we think they do. And to give them permission and the power of communication, I mean, I would love to make a career of speaking to high schoolers and college people to educate them and share my experience so they don't have to make the same mistakes I did.
That's great.
I love that. I really love that vision.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
All right. Well, let's get the requests coming in. Visit robertkandell.com. Speaking opportunities, kids of all ages, students of all ages, no holds barred.
Yep. And if you just want, I do private coaching as well. Or if you just want to chat, there's a way on my website to sign up for a 45-minute consultation. No pressure. If you just want to chat about it, I really do like giving back. So if you just want to chat, please sign up for a session and we can chat.
So after all of this, it just sounds like to me, if someone contacted you, said, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur struggling with how to get the right CFO for my company, would really feel boring to you.
It's not, because companies talk about human dynamics. I mean, it is ridiculous. I have a company with a couple in ex-relationship, ex-romantic partners, and that is, watching the dynamics if they grow their really successful business. I help a law software company with a 25-member team, and it is nonstop. The show, the soap opera, keeps going, and I love them. I really care about the people. So there's no lack of drama in businesses. So I'm thrilled to be part of it.
Awesome. And is there anything on the horizon beyond the book? Do you have a next goal, or daring to think about that beyond November yet? Or
plenty. I have plenty of plans. Really the main thing I want to do is get on stage. I'd like to do a TED Talk or TEDx Talk specifically. That's a big goal of mine. And I'd love to just speak. I'd love to be on the road, 20 weeks of the year, really get out there and do my thing. I'd love to teach workshops. I'd love to get involved with other big, there's a lot of great organizations out there that I don't have the cred now to do. And so writing a book and hopefully having a successful book will get their attention and out there. And so I really just want to pass on this message that any limitations you have are self-imposed, and any belief system you have that you can't have what you want is bullshit. I mean, it doesn't mean you can have it tomorrow. It might not even be for a year, but you can head in the direction of your desire. You're not stuck. 99% of the world, or listening to this podcast is not stuck. There are people who can't get out of their situations, or in countries where they can't. I really want to speak that. But most people, if you're not happy in the situation you're only trapped because you're keeping yourself trapped. And I do believe you can move into the next evolution of your life.
Yeah. If we're all a victim or hero of the story that we tell ourselves the most.
Yeah, I say victim or villain, because villains actually start the game always. Lex Luthor is always starting the game for Batman. So that's my viewpoint. Be the villain. Be the villain in your life. It sounds sexier.
That sounds like a whole new, another book idea there.
It's in the book. Yeah.
All right. Good. All right.
Don't worry. It's in
Oh, gosh, I was going to say, speaking of villains, my dog is trying to be a villain right now. He's just reminding me, I want to go outside. Poor guy. We'll ignore him for a bit longer.
Cool.
Awesome. So then, for the sake of Appio's dog, I guess we can wrap this up as well. I don't want you getting peed on your leg or something. But so again, so the book is coming out in November.
November 4th is the goal. November 5th, excuse me. November 5th is the goal.
And what's the full title again?
UnHidden, a book for men and those confused by them.
So was the discovering that publishers didn't care about a book for men? Is that where and those confused by them?
I really just looked at one publisher, and I have a friend in the business. You have to look for 75 or 80 of them. And I just decided after rejection of one, I want to run this first run by myself. I want to self-publish and create the motion. And then if a publisher wants to pick me up for a second run, I'm a total yes to that. But I really want the freedom. Publishing can take 18 to 24 months after you have your contract. I didn't want to wait. I was ready for this to come out. Self-publishing is so powerful these days. Yeah. And so I'm not a no to publishers. I just want to get this book out there, and I'm glad to work with someone in the future.
And it's interesting because the publishing industry has been changing so much lately. It's almost as if the publishers would prefer to have somebody to self-publish first. That way they have the platform, and then they swoop in. Yeah. So it seems to almost be going in that direction.
Yeah. There's so many different, evolutions of different publishing options. It's mind-boggling, co-publishing, and there's really a lot. It's incredible these days with technology. So I'm going to self-publishing to start, and then we'll see where it goes.
Yep.
That's awesome.
I'm sure soon you'll just be like an injection. Get a shot of Robert. Like, oh, great. Now
like
I know.
The Matrix, it'll download.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. And have you come and speak to larger and larger groups as well.
That's the idea. That'd be my honor.
Awesome. So again, thanks for joining us, Robert. I really appreciate the depth of knowledge and feeling that you bring to all that you're doing.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Wish you tremendous success with the book launch, and we look forward to seeing that and reading that and seeing you on larger and larger stages around the globe.
Thank you.
Reaching younger and younger audiences.
That's the idea.
Cool. And I have to add in there, thank you for helping to facilitate the conversations as well.
Oh, my pleasure. It's important.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
And so everyone visit realmenfeel.org for the blog post on this. And I will do my best to capture every book that Robert mentioned. And we'll have this great syllabus of all of the conversation tonight and ongoing and previews. But again, thanks once again for sharing all of your valuable input, information, and experience.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too.
Yes, have a great night,
everybody.
Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Until next week, visit realmenfeel.org or the Real Men Feel Facebook group and share what you thought of this episode. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Show us some love by visiting realmenfeel.org/swag or digitaltipjar.com/realmenfeel. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com and Appio Hunter at appiohunter.com.